Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to a special review for the brand new Neil Young and Crazy Horse album, World Record. So this just came out on November 18th of 2022. It's actually the 46th studio solo album from Neil Young and the 16th recorded with Crazy Horse, which is pretty amazing in all. We're going to dive into all of that in just a bit here, but before we do, if you're new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with a review for the brand new Neil Young and Crazy Horse album, World Record. So, going way back here, Neil Young actually first recorded with Buffalo Springfield in 1966 and then went solo in 68, but didn't record with Crazy Horse until 1969 when he released Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere. So they've been together a long time, and while members have come and gone, Crazy Horse is known for a particular style and sound. And we're going to touch on that in a little bit here. In all, he has released 52 studio albums in his career, which is pretty dang impressive. We got Buffalo Springfield having released 3 albums, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young also releasing 3 studio albums, and solo 46 studio albums. Neil Young is nothing if not prolific for sure. Thing is, there's also so many unreleased albums that have yet to see the light of day, but he has begun pulling those from the vaults and releasing those, like the most recent one being Toast, which was also a Crazy Horse album released or recorded back in 2001, but only just released this past year. His last 2 studio albums that were also recorded with Crazy Horse, and so including with this new one here, World Record, it's the 16th one that he has released, but it's also making it the first time that Neil Young has recorded 3 consecutive albums with Crazy Horse, something he hasn't done in his career. It's always interesting. Neil is always breaking new ground, at least amongst, within his career and so forth, and I always think it's cool that he keeps pushing the boundaries and stuff like that. So it leads us to what we want to talk about, which is the brand new album, World Record. It's got 11 tracks on it, 10 original standalone tracks. One of them is a reprise track of one that's already on there, so I only really consider this being 10 tracks, even though there is 11 listed on it. It's 47 minutes long, yet it's actually broken up into 2 CDs, which I found to be really strange, but Neil chose to do that in order to preserve the listening experience that is the LP version of this, because that is being released as a double LP, actually 3 LP sides, and the 4th side being Etch. So I am kind of surprised. If you really wanted to preserve that listening experience, it really should be 3 CDs, because somebody's got to get up and flip over the LP to get side A, side B, before you get to side C. But in all, he's doing that with this, so that's why it is 2 CDs, even though the total time on this is only 47 minutes. It is produced by Rick Rubin, and it is recorded to analog tape first, but immediately it was transferred digitally, which I found to be really strange in that Neil has railed so much against the digital. This album here is actually digitally done. They do talk a bit about that in some of their interviews and things of that nature, and I think the way that Rick Rubin got him to do it was, each time you edit using analog tape, you've got to make copies of things, and each time you do that, it degrades a little bit. And so recording it to analog got Neil on board, but immediately transferring it to digital, because you don't degrade when you make copies of things digitally. So they were on board, so they're calling this a hybrid method. Not that that has much to do in the way that this album sounds or plays out, but I did think that that was a little interesting, where Rick Rubin, got Neil to do something, again, a little different than he's done in the past. And I have to say, when I first heard that Rick Rubin was producing the album, I was overly excited. I thought, this is great. He's finally going to return Neil to his classic sound. That's what Rick Rubin is known for, bringing classic artists back to their roots and what it is that they're known for. Unfortunately, that doesn't really happen here on this. Also, the album itself is recorded in 1 take with no overdub, so I sort of leave it questionable as to how much could this album have been produced when it's recorded in 1 take with no overdubs. But that's a different conversation right there. Subject matter on this thing here is that, typical Neil Young albums and some of the most recent ones here, it focuses on the destruction of the environment, something that is near and dear to Neil Young's heart. It's very moody, it's reflective, mostly somber, and that's something that's typical of the last couple Neil Young albums. There's really only 2 tracks on here that rock out hard. Break the Chain, Chevrolet. I'm going to talk a little bit about those a little later in this episode. The album features a number of instruments that are not found on typical Crazy Horse albums. Not to say they've never appeared, but just not typical overall. We got keyboards, pump organ, harmonica, vocal harmonies, and things like that. So making this album sound, to me, very different than a typical Crazy Horse album. But that's very true of the last 2 Crazy Horse albums, Colorado from 2019 and Barn from 2021, of which I've done full reviews of those, and I'm going to leave links in the description below to them. But as with these 2 albums here, something that I have found is I believe that Neil is finally starting to show his age. He's now 77. The vocals are just far from perfect. Not that every Neil Young album has had perfect vocals, because Neil has always been more about recording in the moment, getting the perfect feel to something, and he doesn't really worry about how pristine it is. But I just feel that the last 3, the 2 that I showed you there and the current one, World Record, are really, really starting to sort of emphasize that. It's not as easily able to be glossed over. It's definitely more rough than usual on this album here, but I would say no more rough than what we're hearing on the previous ones. But in all, I'm just starting to hear that on these last 3 albums. Let's talk about some of the tracks, though, that are on here. Track 1, Love Earth. This was the first single that was released from it, and what I heard, and it was not something I was expecting, and I was not very happy with it. I had no desire to go back to it and listen to it. In fact, I listened to it 2, maybe 3 times tops, just to get a feel, and then I didn't listen to it again until I got the album. And I will say, once hearing the album in its whole, in its entirety, it plays better with the album, but it is not a Crazy Horse song at all. Not to say it's a bad song, just not a Crazy Horse song, and that's the opening thing on here. And so it definitely kind of threw me off on this listening experience. Track 3, I Walk With You. This is the first one that actually features some distorted guitar in it, sort of reminiscent of the typical Crazy Horse sound, but it's still more somber than the typical Crazy Horse albums. And so, one of the other things that's, interesting on here is that if this album had even been the more somber aspect, but using the distorted guitar throughout, again, I think I could have gotten behind it a little bit more. Track 4, This Old Planet, beautiful piano ballad song on here. It's the track that is reprised at the very end, and I do like this song. I think it would have been better to open the song or the album with this song as opposed to Love Earth. And had they done that, it would have made for a nice bookend to this album, sort of like some of the other classic albums like Rust Never Sleeps and Freedom and stuff like that, where they both open and close with the same song done, albeit a little differently. Track number 6, Break the Chain. This is the first one that makes a real Crazy Horse feel to it. However, there is some slide guitar work on it. Again, talking about that different instrumentation that appears on some of these tracks. Gives it a very different feel than the typical Crazy Horse songs. And I could have, again, actually gone for an album that was that. Crazy Horse sound and feeling in that heavy, dirgy, distorted guitar. But if they wanted to bring in some of the other instrumentation on it, that could have worked as well. Again, Neil Young always making different albums with different feels and things of that nature to it. But the last track I want to touch on here, track number 10, Chevrolet. By far the album's best track. It clocks in at 15 minutes, so it's an entire album side in terms of the vinyl, and that is what the second CD in here is. It is Chevrolet with the reprise of This Old Earth on it, which is only like a minute and a half or so. So Fantastic, great sound. I long for Crazy Horse to return to that sound, but with the different lineup, with Nils coming in and taking over for Pancho on here, because he's retired, I do think that the horse is into a more somber phase and probably will not fully return the way that we know them from past, again, especially with Neil being at 77. So let's take a look at this album. Here's the front cover of it, which kind of threw me for a loop for the longest time, until later on I realized that there's some fine text down there that shows or mentions this is Neil Young's dad, who was a journalist on here, and it gives his age, and we open it up and we get Neil Young in a younger picture there. That's his mom, and then on the back side we get Neil again, and each time it gives you who it is, and so it refers to him as son. It doesn't say Neil Young on these. Mother, and then on the front, father. So kind of interesting the way he's doing that. Not sure how that all ties into the overall theme of the environment and whatnot, but that is what you're looking at, a picture of his father, not just some random dude walking down the street. And just found it interesting that his dad was a journalist, which makes it interesting then that Neil Young, being a storyteller, a songwriter, and so forth, and trying to get certain ideas and things that are close to his heart across, I'm sure quite the same way as his dad. And then we've got in each one of these is one of the CDs. The first one has the booklet that's in it, but here's the CD. Comes in a case, slipcase like that, which I think is really nice, and the disc just being inside like that. So a little bit of protection on it, but it is in paper, not something else. And then we get the booklet itself with no photos that are in it, just the lyrics, but nicely done nonetheless, not just plain paper. It's actually got some character to how it's done, and it replicates that, world type view thing of a different part of the earth, which is cool. And then we get another shot, and this is the other side on here. This one is his sister. Actually looking at this for the first time, so we get sister and brother. So I'm guessing whole family in there. But I like that this world record type thing all shows different pictures of the globe itself like that. And then just backside of it, and we already saw the inside, but just an overall view of that. So bottom line on the album itself, world record, Neil Young. It didn't make an immediate impact with me right away when I first put this thing on. Certainly the first single didn't do much for me. So I had very low expectations going into this. I will say it has grown on me considerably. Once I was able to drop my preconceived notions on it as a Crazy Horse album that I thought would sound or should sound like a Crazy Horse album. Look, Neil Young has never done what we thought he should do, so why should he be doing it now? Once I dropped that notion that this should sound like a heavy Crazy Horse album like Psychedelic Pill, Greendale, or some other older past Crazy Horse album, I was able to get into this a lot better. I will say this, the album itself definitely has grown on me with many, many listens now. Each track I think is better than the last track on here, so it's also an album that starts, and I say this, with a little, asterisk next to it, the worst song and ends with its best song. Not to say that Love Earth isn't a good song, it's just my least favorite on here, least characteristic of a Crazy Horse song, but ends with Rockin' Crazy Horse. But the album builds all the way through, each track, in my opinion, better than the next. So again, partly why I think this album just grows with each listen. And so I'll say this, if you were one of the ones that gave the album a listen to the first 3 tracks and turned it off because it didn't meet what you thought a Crazy Horse album should be, give it another listen all the way through. I do think the album is a very good album. It's a very good Neil Young solo album. In terms of Crazy Horse albums, maybe not, if you're only looking for the Crazy Horse sound. But me, I'm a Neil Young fan. I'm enjoying this as a Neil Young album, and I think it's pretty good. And I have to say, it may well be better than Colorado and Barn, but that's just my opinion on this. So there you go. That is the review and unboxing for Neil Young's new world record album, just out on November 18th of 2022. 46th studio album by Neil Young, or solo album. for related videos, as I mentioned, I will leave reviews for Barn in Colorado, and I'm going to leave a link to Toast, the one that I mentioned that was released back in 2001, one of the ones that's an archival release that he's now putting out and stuff like that, so pretty cool there. So check the description if you want some more Neil Young, and certainly if you've enjoyed this video, consider sharing it out on social media. Help spread the word both for Neil Young and my channel. We would greatly appreciate it. All right, everyone, take care, have a good one, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.